does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday.
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
There will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences, yes.
That is President Trump just moments ago saying that if there is no deal on Friday with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, that Trump is going to level very serious sanctions, and there's going to be severe consequences. That must really scare the Russian side, I would guess. What do you think, Larry Johnson, CIA analyst and friend of the show?
You know what? Trump is reminding me more and more of Faye Dunaway in the movie Chinatown. You remember at the end when Jack Nicholson is slapping her around, my father, my brother, my father, my husband, keeps changing position. Can't give the same answer. Remember we had those bone-crushing sanctions. They were going to be levied last Friday. What happened? Nothing. Trump, I'm going to do it. Didn't do it. So this is likely more just talk to hear himself talk. It's gotten into the theater of the absurd with him because Trump is pretending that he's going into this meeting with some leverage. He has none. He's got zero leverage. And
Larry, it's even worse than that in my view, because we won't show it now, but on 11 August, so just 2 days ago, Trump was mocking Zelensky. And when he was asked about Zelensky, when Trump said that he was going to have to swap some territories, and Zelensky said, yeah, that ain't happening because of our Constitution. And so Trump mocked him in a tone, that tone of voice he has and whatever, says, yeah, you're going to do whatever we're told, basically. Okay, that's what he said on the 11th. Now then, just a couple of hours ago, now here's what Trump says after getting on the phone call with that same Volodymyr Zelensky.
No, we had a very good call. He was on the call. President Zelensky was on the call. I would rate it a 10, very, very friendly. No, it was always going to be, I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that, I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky. I'm going to call President Zelensky, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing. I would say the second meeting, if the first one goes okay, we'll have a quick second one. I would like to do it almost immediately, and we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky and myself, if they'd like to have me there. And that would be a meeting where maybe it could be absolutely work. But the first meeting will not work that out. Certain great things can be gained in the first. It's going to be a very important meeting. But it's setting the table for the second meeting. I think the second meeting, if the second meeting takes place, now there may be no second meeting, because if I feel that it's not appropriate to have it because I didn't get the answers that we have to have, then we're not going to have a second meeting.
So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. So, but let's first of all start off at talking after in front of national television cameras mocking Zelensky on 11 August. Now on 13 August, here he is saying it's a 10 out of a 10 phone call. What do you make of this dynamic?
Have you ever heard Trump claim a phone call that he was on, where he was the big speaker, was a 1 of 10? Hell no. Everything he does is spectacular. Couldn't be better. Watching him verbally on all these positions. When you see people like Wimbledon watching a tennis match, their heads going back and forth. With Trump, you need a neck brace because your neck is getting whiplash from the different positions. On the one hand, there's going to be severe consequences for Putin if he didn't come out with probably a ceasefire. Next, we're going to have a second meeting. Unless I don't like what I hear in the first meeting. But we're going to have a second meeting, maybe. But the man is simply talking to hear himself talk. This is, he's sort of desperate for a win. He has to keep telling everybody, look what a winner I am. We have, Babe Ruth didn't have to run around telling everybody he was the best home run hitter. Okay? He just walked on the field and did it. And Donald Trump, though, has to tell you how great he is, how wonderful he is, because the fact of the matter is his actions are coming up short. Mr. I'm going to end the war in 24 hours turned out, well, here we are 6 months later. And that's a few more than 24 hours.
And Larry, you and I have talked on more than one occasion that there could be something, all pejoratives aside and just genuine, there could be something psychologically with his mind, something wrong, because just consider, I'll give you an example of something happened earlier today in our first show today with John Mearsheimer. So we were talking about that on whatever day it was when Trump said, all right, there's going to be a 50-day time period, and then either the Russian side agrees to an unconditional ceasefire or there's going to be sanctions. And then, of course, it turned into 10 days and there's going to be sanctions. And then, like you said just a second ago, then when it came to the time on the 8th of August, when that 10-day expired, not a word was spoken. No, he didn't say anything. Just nothing happened here, right? So then in our show this morning, we were talking about why Trump may have bypassed that and had this meeting at all. And John Mearsheimer was suggesting, well, I think Trump was just looking for a way to get out of the box he made for himself about the sanctions. And then almost minutes later, then Gary pops in with that quote just right after it happened, that now he's saying, well, now there will be sanctions. So like if he got out of the box, now he's put himself back in the box. Yeah, Gary tossed this up on the screen there. So now that he's back on the box, well, now then in the subsequent soundbite, he's not saying that if there's no deal this time, there's going to be sanctions like he did before. Now he says the objective is not a 30-day ceasefire, but just to get another meeting. So the goalpost, I mean, you can almost say it was exchanged for a football goalpost for a basketball goal. I mean, it's completely different. Yeah. And what is anyone to make out of what's our actual attempt to strategy?
Yeah, well, I think Putin does understand that. This will be the fourth meeting Putin has had with Donald Trump over the last 9 years or 8 years. So prior to this, he's had 3 previous meetings with Trump. And the only reason I know that is I've seen the different pictures of them shaking hands, sitting side by side. And I counted 3 different ties that Trump was wearing. Okay. That's the only way you can tell it's 3 different meetings. Like, I don't think he got up in the middle of a meeting and put on a different tie.
Unlikely.
Yeah. So when in person, this character that's being played on television by Donald Trump is not the real Donald Trump. The real Donald Trump is much more mild-mannered, very insecure, eager to be liked, very gracious to whoever he's hosting, because he wants them to like him. He needs to be liked. Donald Trump growing up was the kid who got picked last to be on somebody's team. Okay. When you're picking for baseball or football or basketball, Trump was never the first one picked. He was always the last one picked. And he's been living with that all of his life. So that insecurity comes through. And Putin knows this. And Putin's not, even in public, he's not this aggressive son of a bitch. He maintains a cool, calm demeanor. And he's going to be cool and calm with Donald Trump. And we'll explain to him very matter-of-factly that, Mr. President, I'm sure I call him Mr. President or Donald. He said, look, the people of Donetsk and Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea all voted to return to Russia. And so they are now constitutionally part of our country, the Federal Republic. And I have no power to return them. However, what I would be willing to do is that we're already advancing in Dnipropetrovsk, in Sumy, and in Kharkiv. I'd be willing to withdraw my forces from that, provided the Ukrainians also withdraw their forces. We will make no claims to that territory. And then on top of that, we want an end. The NATO has to end its supply of weapons and intelligence. And there's going to have to be new elections too, because right now Zelensky's not a legitimate president. Those are our positions, and we're not going to vary from that. And so Trump, if he's smart, will come out and say, okay, he'll come out and he'll offer that as the peace settlement to Ukraine. Ukraine will reject it. And then, Putin will have told Trump, well, the war will continue. But at that point, at least Trump has an out. Now, will he take it?
Yeah, right. That's the big question.
I honestly can't tell you what he'll do, because what we're seeing between what he says, it's all over the board. So depending on the day and the time, you can say, yeah, he's gonna double down on the war. But okay, so he doubles down on the war. What can the United States do? Well, we're going to sell those weapons to Europe that they're going to then give to Ukraine, but there's 7-year waiting list. Okay, so wait 7 years and we'll be right there. Meanwhile, Putin goes into this meeting knowing that the breakthrough that's taking place between Slavyansk, Commentators, Konstantinovka, and Pokrovsk, that is the last line of entrenched defenses in Western Donetsk. Russia has already retaken all of Luhansk. It is advancing in Zaporizhia. It's also advancing in Kherson, but it could be as many as 2 to 3 weeks away from taking complete control of Donetsk. And if it does that, that is going to break the back of Ukrainians' defense. So, and this, I think, explains why Trump changed the date from 50 days to 10 days, because somewhere in that process, I think either DIA and or CIA briefed him of how precarious the situation was for the Ukrainian armed forces. And just like happened in February of 2015 with the Battle of Debaltseve, when the militias of Donbass, of Luhansk and Donetsk, were on the verge of defeating the Ukrainian army back then. They had assistance from Russia. Angela Merkel rushed to Moscow, begged Putin, please don't, let's Minsk too. And Putin stupidly agreed to it and has since subsequently admitted, yeah, I made a mistake. I trusted him. And he's not going to make that mistake again. He's not going to agree to a CeaseFire that, realizing that Donald Trump is like Wimpy from Popeye. I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. No promises from Trump.
And it's interesting that exchange I talked about before, where Trump was blasting Zelensky on 11 August and now say it's a 10 out of 10 here. What's not changed is Zelensky. So the same thing that Zelensky said that got Trump mad on the 11th of August is the same thing basically he said today.
Ukraine must be discussed with Ukraine. We must support three-sided formats of the negotiations. There should be ceasefire, there should be security guarantees. President Trump said that he supports this and about America's readiness to take part.
And you have to wonder, did Trump really say that? And I think maybe the answer is yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Trump would have to say something against it, but that's almost the opposite of what he said just days before.
Trump tells everybody what he thinks they want to hear, and so because he's really not one to he played this character on The Apprentice where he'd fire people. But the reality is he doesn't like to fire people, and he doesn't like to have those kinds of confrontations. From what I've heard from people that have actually been around him and seen sort of the non-public Donald Trump, he really is. He's not a very decisive figure, but he plays this character in public, and it's an act.
Let me ask you something, Larry. Let's go back further. Let's go back to. I think the 27th or 28th of February, that infamous Oval Office exchange where Trump very much did get into an argument and a discussion because Zelensky, it seemed to me that he actually punked him and played him because he wanted that reaction, I think, and certainly with the vice president, and he just kept on going, et cetera. I thought at that time that's it.
Yeah.
Zelensky is through. He is out. Trump will never have anything to do with him again. And yet, after Zelensky left there and went to Europe and was feted like a conquering hero by most of Europe, he never changed his position on any of those things. He didn't go over to Trump's side. Trump looks like he's going over to Zelensky's side. Every time there's a disagreement, Trump seems to go back to Zelensky. What do you make of that?
Well, again, you make the most accurate point. The one who's been consistent throughout, not changing his position. Oh, actually, there are two. Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky, whereas Donald Trump's he's the political chameleon, depending on who's the last person that he talked to, and frankly, I also think, as we've discussed before, we're dealing with confabulation. And that's where somebody says things that they genuinely believe are true, but they turn out to be provably false. And there's no way you can correct them on that. So, Trump basically allowed Zelensky to disrespect him. Trump's team played it up as if Trump really threw him out of the White House. And, well, boy, we told him who's boss. And yet, who continues to supply weapons? Trump does. Who continues to supply money? Trump does. Who continues to talk to him? Trump does. So, and if you're the Russians, you're just watching this. They just, again, they listen to what Trump says, but they watch what he does. And his actions speak louder than words. And listen, there's a litany of actions since then that we can point to that have U.S. fingerprints on it. The failed assassination attempt of Putin late May, flying into Kursk. The June 1st spiderweb attacks on strategic bombers in Russia. The June 13th decapitation attack in Iran, using the same techniques that were employed in Russia, showing the connection between the two. The deployment of nuclear bombs for the first time in 17 years to Europe, including to Lakenheath in England. Allowing General Christopher Donahue at USUCOM to go out and talk openly about invading Ukraine, intervening in Armenia and Azerbaijan under the auspices of making peace, when in fact the United States has no national security interest there other than using those two nations as a platform for attacking Russia. And so if you're Russia watching all of this, where do you come away and point to me one thing that Donald Trump has done to signal, hey, Russia, I'd like to be your friend. Hasn't sent a box of candy, no bouquet of flowers, hasn't even offered to go out for dinner and pick up the tab.
I guess we'll see, but we'll see if there's any baked Alaska on the menu coming up on Friday. But,
well played.
Trying to be like you, man. Rarely works, but thanks for that anyway. Zelensky wasn't the only one that came out of that meeting talking about what Trump agreed to. It was also French President Emmanuel Macron.
Le deuxième élément sur lequel les choses ont été très claires et exprimées ainsi par le président Trump, c'est que les questions territoriales qui relèvent de l'Ukraine ne peuvent être négociées et ne seront négociées que par le président ukrainien. Et c'est la position que nous soutenons. Elle a été très clairement exprimée par le président Trump. Et donc, elle augure d'une réunion à venir.
Bodes well for upcoming meetings. Gary, if you can pull that full screen up that I had there, where Russia today said they will not talk about, not that one. That's the other one. Not that one either. No, I beg your pardon. It was the second one. So this is from the Russian Foreign Ministry. They said the territorial structure of Russia is enshrined in the Constitution and is not subject to the upcoming meeting between Putin and Trump, said the spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You don't even need to invent something here. The territorial structure of the Russian Federation is enshrined in the Constitution of our country. That says it all. Therefore, with regard to the goals of the Russian delegation in the negotiations in Alaska, they are dictated exclusively by national interest. So you literally have both sides saying that their Constitution prohibits the discussion of any territories being given to one side or the other. Ergo, what is this meeting supposed to accomplish on Friday?
Well, so actually, let's give Trump credit. What he said to Macron was quite truthful. Yeah, he's not going to bring it up because he realizes there's nothing that, Russia's not going to discuss it. And if it's ever going to be discussed, it would have to be discussed between Russia and Ukraine. But that'll be done over a surrender table when that moment comes. So actually, one of the things that could come up, because you got to say, why the meeting in Alaska? What is the significance of Alaska in this? One thing that's been floated in previous discussions was the construction of a bridge and or tunnel connecting Alaska to Russia. And that would be quite the project. Cooperation in space, second thing. Cooperation in the Arctic. Now, what Russia is going to demand and insist on out of this is the lifting of U.S. sanctions, the reestablishment of normal diplomatic relations. And to that end, Ukraine, from Russia's standpoint, they've got nothing to discuss with Ukraine other than they wish the United States would stop supplying intelligence and weapons. Because Ukraine is losing on the battlefield. Russia is advancing rapidly. Yesterday, they punched through in about a minimum of 10 kilometers up to 20 kilometers, and it's continued today. So the general staff 2 weeks ago reportedly told Putin that they envisioned that they could break the Ukrainian army at least east of the Dnieper within 2 to 3 months. And at the time, I was wondering, was that just a story being put out? But based upon what's happened over the last 5 days, I think that's entirely possible.
Well, we actually showed earlier today a commentary by Denis Davidov, who's a pro-Ukrainian mapper and YouTuber, and he showed very graphically on the map. And one of the things that's good about him, he has his slant, but he's also very accurate in what's being promoted. And he told that the whole of the Donbass is now at risk where it wasn't before. And really the next 2 to 3 days could be crucial, because if the Ukraine side has rushed down reinforcements, the Azov Corps from Kiev area, and Russia is now trying to move up exploitation forces. So it's going to be a battle to see who can take advantage of this. Can the Russians penetrate through it and get behind the line in the Ukraine side in numbers, or can the Ukraine side come down and block it off? But as John Mearsheimer pointed out earlier today, there's a bigger risk there for the Ukraine side, because now that battle is being fought out in the open, where Russia has the advantage in artillery, glide bombs, and even if there was parity in drones. Now then, all of a sudden, the Ukraine side is fighting out in the open, where the Russians, by some reports, are actually using some of the Ukraine fortifications they captured against these reinforcing forces. So this could go south pretty fast.
Well, and what most in the West don't appreciate about Donbass, which really that encompasses Luhansk and Donetsk, but Donetsk in particular it's a unique area because of the concentration. Well, a lot of the videos we see are of open fields and hedgerows. The reality is these towns, it's dotted with these small industrial towns. They do mining, they do smelting, they do manufacturing. And this has been unique to this area going back really over 120 years. And in the early days of the Soviet Union, they produced a map which showed Donbass as a heart, like a beating heart, and it was Donbass Serce Rossiya, Donbass, the heart of Russia. So, that's why they've been very methodical and slow in taking this territory back. But now, with Pokrovsk and up to Commentators and Sloviansk, that it's a line that runs sort of south to north, with Pokrovsk at the south. Once they're through there, there's nothing to stop them going all the way through Dnipropetrovsk, which is the next oblast. It's a Ukrainian oblast immediately to the west, all the way to the Dnieper River. Nothing to stop them.
Yeah, and then it's just a matter of, can the Russians extend their lines of logistics that long? Because apparently, to one Russian reporter that I talked to recently, said that's one of the big concerns there is, do they get too far out ahead of their logistics that they can't keep it supported? Because I'm not sure that they were prepared for this breakthrough right now. Apparently they're trying to get forces there, but that's really what we're going to find out here coming up pretty soon. I want to shift back to the front here, because this is crucial, because this whole dynamic on the battlefield should be very much at the front of any kind of discussions. But earlier today, Bill Browder was asked, who's a very famous person, American who goes on British television a lot, was asked, does Putin actually even want the war to end?
Vladimir Putin has one objective, which is he wants to remain at war with Ukraine. His recent words are very much just to try to find a way to please Donald Trump, so that Donald Trump doesn't look at him as the person standing in the way of a end to the war. And he puts out impossible conditions, somehow has convinced Trump that those conditions aren't impossible. And the objective of this exercise is to put Ukraine in the position of looking like it's the impediment to ending the war.
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's so much an issue of impediment as it is Russia doesn't want to just keep the war going. I think they want to conquer the territory, or at least what they need to get their security. How do you see it?
Well, let's first deal with Mr. Browder. I encourage everyone that has not had the chance to read Alex Craner's book, The Grand Deception, the Bill Browder hoax. Browder is the son of one of the man who was in charge of the Communist Party in the United States, the American Communist Party. And
well, there's two words you don't normally hear going together.
And Browder was raised in the Soviet Union or spent quite a bit of time there. He's mad at Putin because Putin isn't a communist. He's mad at Putin because Putin was attacking some of Browder's nefarious economic activities. And on top of it, Browder was the instigator for the Maginski Act that was used as one of the first sanctions against Russia. So, everything he says comes with the light of ideological baggage and a definite point of view. Putin, this is not a war between Russia and Ukraine, even though that's how it's portrayed in the West, even though that's how it is being briefed to Donald Trump by the CIA. And the only reason I say that is because of Seymour Hersh's latest article, where he repeated what he was being told by a senior intelligence official, that is, in fact, how they view it. This, from Vladimir Putin's standpoint, the root causes of this have been NATO expansion to the east, continued efforts by NATO to subvert Russia, using Ukraine as a pawn, as a proxy. And, I've used this statistic before, but I want people to contemplate it. Since 1995, if you draw up a list of, there's now 32 countries in NATO, and you say, which of these countries have hosted more NATO military exercises? And by host, I mean the exercises have taken place in their territory. Even though Ukraine is not a member of NATO, Ukraine would be number 6 on that list, which means 24, 26 other NATO countries have not come close to Ukraine in terms of sponsoring, hosting NATO military exercises, which is why Putin and company are saying, this is NATO. NATO has got to stop this expansion. The NATO bases that have been, Yavoriv in Western Ukraine was a de facto NATO base and still has remained somewhat intact, even though it's been hit several times by Russia since the start of the special military operation. But they're also constructing a major base in Romania that'll be the largest, be larger than anything in Europe, supposedly.
Wow.
And they've got a base in Poland. If Russia was doing this on our borders in Canada and Mexico, we'd lose our damn minds and we would view it as a threat. Why in the hell do you think we can get away with doing that to Russia and not suffer consequences? That's what Putin's fighting against. That's why, again, this lie that's being perpetuated that, Putin wants to rebuild the Soviet Empire. I mean, number one, the Soviet Empire, I don't recall them having any colonies in South America, Central America, Africa, Asia. They've stayed at their own borders. They haven't gone out to conquer the world. And one of the reasons they pushed into Eastern Europe at the end of World War II was to create a buffer state, because they had been invaded 3 times before that in the previous 125 years. And people say, although they were no way they'd give territory back. Excuse me, They occupied Austria. They walked out of Austria without a shot being fired over negotiations because they had assurance from Austria that Austria was going to be neutral. So let's deal with the damn facts and not this fantasy. That's
Yeah, a
not
lot of
directed
people
at
don't like
you.
to do that. We would rather deal with narratives.
Yeah.
So that was Bill Browder telling everybody what Russia actually wants. Well, here's what Russia for themselves says what they're actually looking for. This is a foreign ministry spokesman.
In words, the Europeans support Washington's and Moscow's diplomatic efforts to regulate the crisis around Ukraine. In fact, the European Union is sabotaging them. EU attempts to use Russian assets in the interests of the Kiev regime, which is already close to bankruptcy, will not help Ukraine, and most importantly, will not change the course of the special military operation. Its goals, as we have repeatedly said, will be achieved in full.
So that seems to be what they're doing right now. They're saying, we'll talk, but we are going to achieve our goals one way or the other, either militarily or diplomatically, which we've shown Ambassador Nebenzia, who said on the UN Security Council a month or two ago. And interestingly enough, you have Zelensky directly saying, yeah, whatever they're saying, don't listen to that because, well, Putin's just bluffing.
We also discussed the situation at the front line on the battlefield. I told the US president and all our European colleagues that Putin is bluffing.
He says this, Larry, as the penetration into his lines north of Pokrovsk was crumbling by that day. I mean, if it's possible, walk us through what could be in his mind when he's telling President Trump, when he's telling Macron and Merz and all these other guys that don't worry about Putin. He's just bluffing. When we see this, I mean, you might as well look at that red all over the place. Looks like a stuck pig. That's what Russia's actually doing. And does that look like a bluff to you?
Yeah, no. And I don't know if it's that Zelensky is just so addled from his reported excessive use of cocaine, or if the people around him are lying to him, not telling him the truth. But, you know, it really doesn't matter because the reality that's unfolding there on the ground, it will become apparent at some point. And, you know, our mutual friend, Alexander Mikuras, he brought up a report recently describing, and it was from Western sources, the manpower situation for Ukraine. The best they can field right now is about 300,000 men all along that 1,200-mile line of contact, which, while 300,000 sounds like a lot, spread out over a distance that goes from, say, Miami Beach to Washington, D.C., that's a lot of territory to cover. And that's essentially what we're talking about here. Whereas Russia's military strength has been continuing to grow at a steady pace, up to including now reportedly 1.3 million in the army, with 600,000 deployed in Donetsk and all along the line of contact, which means they've got a 2-to-1 advantage. And unfortunately for the Ukrainians, they don't have enough people even to man these heavy fortifications that were built in the areas of Commentators, Sloviansk, and Pokrovsk. They only have a few troops, and the Russians are bypassing them, and they're skirting around them, and then they're getting them surrounded, and then they have to give up or die.
In the remainder of the time we have left here, I want to look at a little bit beyond Friday, because most people are talking certainly everything on this show so far is everybody's just looking at the next 48 hours. But Russia is famous for not looking past a little bit beyond the end of their nose, which we rarely do. And that is what is going to happen after this war is concluded, however it's concluded, because some information coming out of Russia here is that they're actually worried about their national security beyond the resolution of the Ukraine war. In fact, here that Ukraine is saying that, well, first of all, they're going to have a Zapad 2025 exercise coming up, which allegedly is going to include somewhere around 150,000 troops. They said this is an important element of strategic, first of all, deterrence for us. This is the Russians talking. As the head of the state demands, we must be ready for anything. We see the situation on our western, northern borders and cannot calmly observe militarization and military activity. We demonstrate our openness to peacefulness, but the powder must be always kept dry. And then I think it was a day or two ago that you had the Russians saying, hey, we're looking west, and here's what we see. We see it looks like you guys are preparing for war. The military-industrial complex of the EU countries is rapidly increasing the production of shells and missiles, which we boast about. So there's certainly a lot of truth in that which we don't hide behind.
Sure.
But what does this tell you to what Russia's bigger goals are besides the Donbass?
Well, I think their first task is to strengthen the BRICS alliance, strengthen the alliance with China, India, Brazil in particular. South Africa is not quite as critical, but falling under that BRICS umbrella is Iran. The movement we saw last Friday with Trump hosting the Armenian and Azerbaijani leaders in this ostentatious peace agreement that really, when you dig into it, you're not sure what's there. There are some reports, unconfirmed, that there were promises made each that they could join NATO. And in the Zangezur corridor, this strip of land along southern Armenia that connects Azerbaijan to Turkey, that is seen as a place that has been granted to the United States. And if U.S. troops go there, this is going to really increase tensions both with Iran, but also with Russia. Russia already has delivered some very serious warnings to both Armenia and Azerbaijan. And, look, those are two piss ants of countries. I think Azerbaijan total 10 million. So it's not a big place, and they don't have a big army. They don't have anywhere the force to withstand Russian military action if it comes to that. And Russia, like we would, is going to defend any threat on its borders from the West. Yet the West continues to incite that. The problem the West has is it's not only its military strength is in question, but its economic strength. And what we're seeing with BRICS, if you would have asked me a year ago, I would have put question marks besides India and Brazil in terms of their enthusiasm for the BRICS project. Well, congratulations, Donald Trump. You have fixed that, because in the wake of these latest sanctions that were imposed on both Brazil and India, that to say that they have got the
furious
case of the red ass would be an understatement. India popped right off by saying, oh, that F-35 deal, forget about it. We're not interested. That other deal, we're going to buy planes from you. We don't want those either. And remember, our defense minister's coming to meet with Hegseth. No, he's not. We're staying back home. In fact, we're going to go meet with China. So, and Brazil has done similar. In fact, Brazil says, we got to have a meeting. I figured Lula would have spent the year doing and said, too busy to meet. Let me go to the beach. No, we got to have a meeting and confront this. So the United States, Trump has succeeded in uniting the BRICS countries in a way that even a year ago, they were not united in this way. So up against that, so Russia recognizes it's not focused on Ukraine because it sees this whole Ukrainian issue in a broader context, that this is a confrontation with the West, that there's nothing the West is doing that wants to reach an accommodation with Russia. They're going to lie, they're going to pretend they want to, but their ultimate goal is to destroy Russia. And why? It's no longer a communist nation, but what it is a solidly Christian nationalist state and promotes traditional values that are anathema to the West. That's what this is about.
Plus, I think that they don't want a peer competitor. They want somebody who's subservient, and they don't like it that there's another entity they can't control.
Yeah.
So they want to try to control that. But the problem is, all we do is make them stronger and us weaker. So it's not going to work out very well, I don't think, in the long term.
Correct.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on today and giving us these insights here, because a lot of stuff we get from you, we just don't get from any other source, and we really appreciate it.
I'm happy to share. Thanks.
Always my pleasure. And thank you guys for joining us too. We will look forward to seeing you on the very next episode of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.